Mr. Becerra.
Thank you, Ryan Becerra, Barkowitz, Chronic, and Shanahan for a number of upstream agencies. There's a second matrix relating to the sixth draft. Will that be discussed before the sixth draft comes out? Some of us have very serious concerns about recommendation WRR5 that we've expressed and continue to express, and I think it's consistent with this discussion we had earlier today about the kinds of impacts that delta management measures can have on upstream reservoirs, can have on the water rights that agencies have relied on for decades. And WRR5 essentially says you may have those water rights, but you now have new conditions on how you are allowed to use them. And it's causing a fair amount of consternation, as you can imagine, in the watershed, and I think resulting in the council giving some very serious mixed messages to the people who are interested. And I brought along today a screenshot of your website on the point. So if I can just hand that around. This is a screenshot of the home page of the council's website. And it has a revolving series of major items. And one of them is entitled Delta Plan Won't Alter Water Rights. But to my mind, that's exactly what recommendation WRR5 proposes to do. You have a water right permit under existing law. There are certain rules as to the changes you can make to that, and we're going to add new conditions to that, or at least we're going to recommend that there will be very significant new conditions as to whether or not you can change your place of use, change your point of diversion, and that, I think, and I've said this before, it causes significant problems under Water Code Section 85021, which has two sentences. The first one talks about reducing reliance on delta water, and the second one talks about improving regional self-reliance on water used from the watershed. And that second sentence has a laundry list of potential water management actions, including local and regional projects. And under those kinds of projects require water right change petitions.
Require what?
In many cases, the kinds of projects listed in the second sentence of Water Code Section 85021.
Recycling, advanced technology, that.
Local water supply. Recycling is a good example. Mm-hmm. To take the water out of the water course and put it in a purple pipe, you have to file a change petition with the water board. In many cases, to do a new local or regional project, you need a new point of diversion, which is a change petition. So if the board were to adopt this recommendation, it becomes very difficult to see how, in the watershed, we would do exactly the kinds of projects that are described in that code section. And I think you need a pretty robust discussion about that at some point, because I think it's pretty problematic. And there was a coalition letter from upstream agencies that talked about this, I think last week, and it's potentially a significant problem. And there wasn't discussion of it today. I hope there's some discussion of the recommendation before the sixth draft.
Do you, Mr. Becerra, are your water rights constitutional in origin? That is, does the state constitution grant the water rights to any water right holder?
No, they're all subject to Article 10, Section 2.
Are they not statutory? Your area of origin is certainly statutory. That's one of the assertions in your letter. Water rights are granted by the action which created the State Water Resources Control Board or its successor with the 1914 permit system. You have
in the water rights that this recommendation would cover would be post-14 rights because they would be permitted rather than pre-14 rights not subject to the jurisdiction of the state board. And
let me just, because these are statutory rights, do you believe that a water right, for example, immunizes the right holder from complying with the water quality laws of California or of the United States?
No, I don't understand the relationship there at all. I mean, the water code has some pretty distinct code sections, water code section 1702 primarily, concerning the conditions that apply to change petitions under permits and licenses. And so that establishes the rules that people currently operate under. And of course, if you're going to have a kind of project that affects the physical environment, you're going to need to do a CEQA document in some way and deal with mitigation measures already. So all I'm asking is, will the council discuss that recommendation before the 6th draft comes out?
Mr. Fiorini.
Ryan, I thought you did a very effective job at our last meeting of presenting the dilemma, the problem, the circular logic, and so on and so forth. And your recommendation was to delete WRR5, and the option you provided was a protest that the council could make on any particular action. It was well done. Joe, did any council members respond to that and ask you to do that?
Nobody.
Okay, so that didn't fly. How about, and I would recommend to my colleagues that you have presented a very real problem that I'm concerned about. How about if you list exemptions, such as recycling or water reuse projects that would require a point of diversion change in keeping with in support of achieving the co-equal goals, tweaking the language, if you will, as opposed to eliminating it. Is that something that you could do that would create some exemptions that would allow you to, in representing your clients, to move forward without the fear of being shut down for a reasonable project?
The possibility that struck me, based on some comments that Mr. Ray made potentially, is that language currently talks about feasible. And the concern I've heard from many, many people about it is who gets to decide what's feasible for us. And if it's something to the effect of, we've done our planning, we've looked at our management plan, and this is our most feasible option, and we demonstrate in whatever it is, our resolution approving the project, that we've evaluated our options and checked the box that we have done that, and that satisfies the policy, then that might work. Because the main concern is having, and the suggestion at the last meeting was, well, that's how CEQA works, is that you do an environmental review and then you as the lead agency get to determine what the feasible mitigation measures are, or the feasible alternatives are, and you demonstrate that you've done that and you've complied with CEQA. If that's the kind of process we're talking about, that's potentially workable. What's most troubling about it is you do your planning, you rely on your water rights for decades, and then you go for a change petition that implements them, and somebody else gets to say, oh no, you did your math wrong, and what you thought wasn't feasible actually is feasible, and I'm sorry, but you don't get to do your project.
Yes, Ms.
Is
Marcus.
that your biggest concern, which is the vagueness of just saying of what feasible or reasonable is? If that's it, we've talked about, and we would see this in the 6th draft or before, putting boundaries on what we mean so people don't have to worry about the extreme. I think we had that conversation a few times. I don't know what the new language might be.
If we're headed that way,
I'm sorry, just one thing. But listening to the way you explained it, it made it seem like whatever your water rights are immutable from time immemorial. And I have to say, I was having a reaction that was a little bit like the chairs to June, who's like you, very helpful in here, which is if you're saying we get all the water we ever could have used in 1914 or 18, whatever you said, 52, etc. We have to deal with the reality of today. And so while I understand the need to press the case, I think in this we're being extremely mild, because we could have, and this isn't a boldly go place I'm suggesting we go, but we could do what Australia did. We could say we're going to recommend redoing all these water rights because it's a mess, and it makes it almost impossible to actually maximize the use of water. But that would be pretty radical. We're not suggesting. In fact, we're trying to find what are ways you make this
and
work.
I will give you a copy of my article that talks about what happened in Australia and how it's different from here.
It is different from here, but the principle holds, which is we are trying to solve a totally We have a totally artificial, well-intentioned but not considering the consequences plumbing system overlain by these incredibly complex series of doctrines and early things. It makes it almost impossible to have a real water policy in California. But we're trying to figure out how do you make it more rational. Yeah, we're being very conservative in what we're recommending. If you're concerned that there's vagueness in it, like we've seen in these, I'm all for making stuff.
And partly to keep my comments as short as possible, simplified. And in the case of most of the clients I work for in this, they're involved in watersheds where there's been a very substantial amount of effort to reconcile environmental and water supply needs. And, I think the water community as a whole, uncomfortably perhaps, but, understands public trust concerns, environmental concerns, understands that CEQA's in play, and whatever the water rights are, if you want to change the physical environment, you need to do CEQA and go through all of that and get your permitting. And I think it's this issue that somebody else gets to decide what's feasible for you is really the guts of the objections on WRR5. And so if the council's willing to go towards something where if we have looked at our options and checked it off and done our resolution and demonstrated that this is the feasible option for us, we are satisfied under that recommendation, then that may be a route that's possible.
Maybe. I'm sort of leery of something that says nobody gets to look over your shoulder at all. So let's talk about it when we get to it. It's not set in stone.
This is kind of a classic illustration of where we find ourselves at the end of the process. We spend our time arguing not about things purported to carry regulatory impact, but about recommendations, and we are specifically authorized by the legislature to make recommendations related to the co-equal goals. And so a non-binding recommendation that you don't like becomes more important than the regulations that are controlling in the Delta Plan. It's consistent with everything I've learned about politics that it doesn't matter whether it's a legally effective statement or not. If you don't like it, you don't want it said.
Well,
but
I don't think you should underestimate your impact on the world. I mean,
it's gotten you to meetings for 2 years.
Yeah, it's been fascinating. But on the water board, you are getting traction at the water board. Simple fact.
Look, the water board's just like every other government agency. They sit around, they read the reports, they pick and reference some of our reports, saying things they want to do anyway, but it helps them make their case for what they're doing.
At the Aqua Conference in December, the water board's assistant chief counsel for water rights appeared at the Legal Affairs Committee meeting and said, the Delta Stewardship Council is telling us we need to complete an update of our Bay Delta water quality control objectives by June of 2014, so we are reallocating 60 or 90 person PYs in order to get that done because the council is telling us that. So the concept that your recommendations are only recommendations, I think you need to recognize that that's not entire, doesn't completely indicate the real world impact of what those things mean.
Joe.
I just wanted to say, we actually considered putting this on the list of top issues, and we decided first that we'd heard a lot about this last time and that we felt that we could resolve the issue in drafting, and we actually have a meeting scheduled with you next week, and we thought
excellent
that would be the end. So we didn't put it at the top of our list of things because of that.
I'm good with that approach. Let's go.
Thank you. I appreciate